Good evening to you and a warm welcome to Interface here on SABC 3. My name is Thembi Samachele. And tonight on the program, we'll look at Madiba's legacy as the former president celebrates his 94th birthday on Wednesday. South Africans and people across the world will dedicate 67 minutes of their time to worthy causes. But is that how we should celebrate the struggle icon? That's one of the questions we're asking tonight. And as usual, we do welcome your thoughts on SMS 33726 or on our Facebook page. That's Interface on SABC 3. Let's introduce you to our studio guests now. Cindy Zilwa is the CEO of Ngongi, and Mpumelelo Mkhabela is the editor of the Sowetan newspaper. Silo Hatang is the head of public programming and also the spokesperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. A warm welcome to all three of you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Thembi.
Silo, let's start with you and just outline what Madiba's legacy is over and above reconciliation.
I think Madiba's legacy is complex. You can't say it's one thing and stick with that to say that he was just a man who reconciled us. It's not enough. His legacy is about restoring, part of that legacy is about restoring human dignity, for example. Poverty alleviation, where he redefines how we see poverty, for example, that it's not just about charity. But it's about restoring human dignity and a call of justice. So at the heart of Madiba's legacy is about justice, that social justice should be the driving force. But people should be taking responsibility for ensuring that they build their own communities, also that they hold governments responsible. So that government must be accountable, while citizens don't just sit back and say it's the responsibility of government. They need to be active citizens who build around what government is doing.
Mpumele, looking at the stories that you churn out on a daily basis, do you think as a country we are honoring and living up to the legacy that Madiba is leaving us with?
I don't think so. I don't think we are living up to that legacy to the extent to which we should. I would like to analyze Madiba's legacy and the extent to which we are celebrating it or we are living up to it by looking at what he actually stood for. And I'd like to frame this discussion in terms of the 4 dimensions once identified by one political scientist by the name of John Kane from the US, who wrote a book titled The Politics of Moral Capital. And he tried to analyze leaders as people who possess or lack moral capital. And he identified 4 issues. One being that we must understand the cause of those leaders, the cause that they stand for, or the cause that they're fighting for. And secondly, we must understand the actions that those leaders take in fulfilling the cause or the end results for which they are standing or fighting for. And thirdly, we must look at whether those leaders are able to live by example in terms of what they stand for. And fourthly, whether their rhetoric or their symbolism in society is able to live up to what they actually set out to do. And I think as we act, both personally or at institutional level in terms of government or public sector or private companies or family members or wherever we are in civil society, we have to think in terms of, are we able to live up to that legacy? Madiba, in terms of action, in terms of what he stood for, in terms of example, in terms of all of these areas.
And you're saying we're not? He
was quite outstanding. And I think we're falling short, quite frankly. If you look at the political leadership in this country, most of them, if I may put it harshly, they're actually backstabbing Madiba's legacy. If you look at the private sector, for example, they're not reaching out enough to those who are dispossessed. There's been political reconciliation, but there's not been economic reconciliation.
Right.
You can go on and on and on.
And I want us to touch on how we can actually live up to that legacy, what more we need to do as a country. But let me just bring you in, Cindy, and ask, for you, what does this legacy encapsulate?
I think it's a very complex question, as Silo was saying, because Utatu Madiba was an outstanding leader, and there's many legacies that can be attributed to him. But I think for me, what actually stands out there are about 5. And when I talk to my daughter about them every day, she even developed an acronym to say, oh, Mama, I know it's EGGS, E-R-G-G-S. You know, so the first one is education. And for me, for us to leave that legacy, it does not depend on our leaders. It's all of us collectively. Utatu Madiba sacrificed a lot and invested a lot of time to become educated, and that enabled him to be able to lead the struggle in liberating ourselves. And education is not only important just for that purpose. It's something that liberates you from poverty. It liberates you from oppression or any suppression. It creates that independent state of mind and the ability to live your sense of purpose and to actually find it. So if all of us, we can try as parents and as kids to make sure that our kids are encouraged all the time to take advantage of educational opportunities, and at the same time, if the children of South Africa can be thirsty for education and utilize any opportunity that comes their way, South Africa will be an educated country. And that would fast track our process, you know, towards moving forward.
How
and
do we do that, Sissy, when we have textbooks not delivered to schools? We have kids still in this day and age, 17 years into our democracy, sitting under trees and not having classrooms. The education system in this country is falling apart.
Tembi, I have got a particular example of a young boy who got 4 A's and 1 B in matric. And this boy got that in the rural district of Tsolo. His name is Zukile Mancepa. At the time, the teachers were not teaching. There were no books, but he locked himself and utilized every single opportunity he had. And this guy got distinctions. So for me, sometimes it starts from your thirst, from your hunger to get something, such that you don't actually see the barriers. The barriers are there, but you must see how you can actually overcome them. So I'm not saying the system is pure, but I'm just saying even Madiba himself, when he studied, it's like saying, how do you study without electricity? There are millions who studied with candles. You know, so I'm just saying we need to be so thirsty for opportunities, such that any barrier that comes really doesn't count. I think the second point, it's really, we've touched on reconciliation, but for me, how we can actually leave that legacy is just to make sure that as we have goals to achieve, there's a principle of interdependence in life. And what it means is that somewhere along the line, we will need one another to be able to support us to achieve our goals. So we've got to continuously reconcile. And adding to what Mpumi is saying, for instance, South Africans who are in positions of power and leadership, they must resist the temptation of settling scores amongst one another. Because once somebody is in a position of power or authority and he utilizes that to settle scores with other people, now that person is not rising above that personal challenge and is actually sacrificing what could have been achieved for the benefit of the country. So I think for me, when it comes to reconciliation, that's how we can really make sure that the legacy is there. And
Okay. Now, looking at what you as the foundation want to do, and you've been calling on us to do, 67 minutes dedicated to doing something good for somebody else in honor of Madiba. Lots of criticism this week on that, saying, you know, that's not the way to honor Madiba. What you need to do is over and above that. And the foundation has said, look, we say make every day a Madiba Day. But in practice, is it really the right route to take, to say, let's take the 67 minutes, let's be charitable for that little bit, and people must just go on with their lives after that?
I think we should contextualize Mandela Day around how we see it as the beginning. You'll remember that Madiba gave more than 67 years of his life to ensure that we enjoy the legacy that we've all been talking about. Now we're saying you start with the 67 minutes. And the theme for this year, the power of the theme for this year, is that we're saying you take action, you inspire change in your community, and you make every day Mandela Day. So you can see that it goes beyond just saying you should be just do gooding. We're saying go out and have change, create change around yourself, make sure that the systems work. It's not about charity alone. So we are saying social justice needs to be lived. We need to be ensuring that people start with the 18th of July and hope that they can then do it. And we've seen many examples of people doing it progressively.
But are we not just massaging the consciences of those that have a little bit? Because you can say, let's start with one day and let's start with 67 minutes and then let's grow it from there. But it's great rhetoric. In practice, though, what you find is people going out there and doing something and feeling, oh, I've done something for the poor, so now I can go on with my life. And instead of it being what you're saying, where it becomes the culture and the norm on a daily basis.
I think you can't discount the fact that those that go, the haves, who go out and do a bet, some of them will come back and say, I didn't actually know how many South Africans live. And you ask yourself, where have you been? I mean, even some of our politicians will say, suddenly say, I didn't know that our people live like this. So we see the 18th of July as a driving force to ensuring that we understand precisely what Sismpum was saying around it, Sisindi was saying around things that we need to be understanding how we live, reconcile every day, not just socially, but also economically.
Okay.
So there needs to be an investment in communities, and that investment won't just happen. There needs to be a call for people to go out and invest. We could just say, always point fingers, like Madiba was saying, that you could just blame the past, you could just keep on blaming. But until such time that we identify opportunities and do something,
All right.
there won't be movement.
67 minutes dedicated to doing something good for somebody else in honor of Utatu Mandela. Is that really the way to honor his legacy? That's the question we're asking you tonight. Interface on SABC 3, that's how you find us on Facebook. 33726, that's our SMS line. Do keep those thoughts coming. Stay with us. And we're looking at Utatu Mandela's legacy on Interface tonight on SABC 3. Welcome back. Our guests tonight are Sisindi Zilwa, who's the CEO of Ngongi. Mpumelelo Mkhabela is the editor of the Sowetan newspaper, and Silo Hatang is the head of public programming and also the spokesperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Now, before the break, we're talking about whether or not the 67 minutes campaign is the way to go, and I would like you to weigh in. Let's start with you, Sis.
I think from my side, Silo, you've spoken about this Mandela Day. I think at a personal level, first of all, as a Jehovah's Witness, we don't support birthdays, and therefore we don't celebrate birthdays, and therefore the essence of the day to us is not important. But then one of the legacies that we talk about is generosity, which is what Silo and the foundation are actually asking for, and we are supporting that, but it's a daily task. And what we learn from generosity, people need to be generous. And generosity doesn't mean you need to have enough first before you can actually share with others. Generosity is about utilizing your resources, be it is time, or if you are in positions of power and influence, maybe you're sitting in boards or positions of authority, you should be able to create opportunities for others without expecting any benefit back. And that generosity goes along with sacrifice sometimes, because if, for instance, you've got to make sure that black people are empowered in the position where you are in. Now, if you want to start to empower yourself first, then you are not going to be able to empower others, because immediately you are seen as conflicted. So generosity means sometimes sacrificing what could be coming to you and making sure that you create opportunities to empower others, because your turn might actually come, but it's actually not there. So now, to practice things like those, you can't start on a particular day. I think we need to celebrate his life and be able to live his legacy by focusing on the long-term issues. As I'm saying, things like education, reconciliation, the spirit of generosity, the spirit of sacrifice for the benefit of others,
where
which
it
is
comes
very
to for
important.
me. In a country like this one, Mpumelelo, in a country where many people have very little, and you call on all of us to dedicate time, to dedicate money or resources or whatever it is we've got to share with those that have less. How do we get such a message to trickle down to everybody in South Africa so that everybody embraces, or even everybody in the world, because this is a worldwide campaign, to embrace it and to make sure that all of us are sharing in it?
To a certain extent, I mean, the fact that the United Nations declared Mandela Day an international day in 2009, to a certain extent, I mean, that has been accepted internationally, that we have to do something all over the world in celebration of Madiba's legacy by giving something to those people who are less privileged. But I think in South Africa, there is a tension between the cosmetic charities that people give out and the substantive changes that are required in society. Of course, given the disparities in our country and the inequalities, there's very little that charities can do to change people's lives. But the fact that we've got too many poor people, even every little cent will count. But
So
it won't replace the fact that we do need to substantially change the way the economy works. We do need to substantially change people's lives so that they can stand on their own. They don't rely on charities, which is what, by the way, Madiba fought for. He didn't fight for people to get charities. He didn't fight for people to and to perpetually depend
Yeah.
on small cosmetic things. He fought for the fundamental change in society. But while we are still far away from achieving that, in the meantime, those kind of charities serve as stopgap measures.
So do you agree
can't-
with Silo that this is a good start? This campaign is a good start?
It's a good start, but again, it can't be a good start 10 years later. It can't be a good start 5 years later. Something fundamental must happen. And it will have to start from people's souls. It has to start from within people's consciences before it can spread to their families, their communities, and society in general. If people are giving away because they want to promote the brands of their companies, as we are actually seeing now, that's what is happening. And of course, the Madiba brand is a big brand, and no one wouldn't like to associate himself with that brand. And people are taking advantage of that to promote their brands, to promote their goods, which is fine. It's part of their corporate social investment program. But it must not detract from the fact that we do need substantial change in society, where people, citizens can stand on their own. As he spoke about active citizenship, what do we do to ensure that 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, 50 years down the line, people are able to stand on their own? They don't require 67 minutes for them to get pap and place. Do you really need something like that?
And in support of what Mpumi is saying, Tembi, as we all know, it's important to teach a man how to fish than to give him the fish for the day. If you can take the corporate budget of all companies, of the amount of money that they actually spend on CSI, and you consolidate that and you ask these companies, instead of doing this as charity, create jobs for these people. Employ them using exactly the same budget. You will be amazed at the amount of resistance that will be coming there, because now you're actually changing the fundamentals to say you're not throwing a fish to the person. You are saying, come and you must learn to fish for yourself. And I think that's what we're actually asking for, to say when Tatu Mandela went through all that, it's quite true that it was not for black people or poor people to forever have a cap in the end, to wait who's going to give them this for this day and whatever, but they must be given opportunities to stand up for themselves and restore human dignity in terms of giving people opportunities to really work for themselves.
All right, we've got to take another short break. When we come back, I'd like us to talk a little bit about the more controversial aspects of this legacy. Remember that we do take your thoughts on 33726, that's on SMS or on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC3. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Interface here on SABC3, talking about Madiba's legacy as we celebrate his 94th birthday on Wednesday. Silo, what do you say to those that say that Madiba's focus on reconciliation in 1994 and in his 5-year tenure after that is actually a huge cause of the racial tension that we see bubbling in South Africa today? We saw it with the spear painting. We've been seeing it coming up every now and again, that the fact that he came on the scene and he said everybody must just, live together, let's try and build this rainbow nation, is actually at the root of what's happening today.
It could be that another argument that comes up is maybe he didn't have enough time to complete that project, the reconciliation project. Hence, you'd hear Madiba all the time saying that it's in your hands to make that difference. You need to then take over this legacy in terms of creating better racial relations and ensuring that reconciliation happens. I think that we tend to expect that Madiba would have done, within those 5 years, would have done everything. And you can see that he also accepted it in a way that he couldn't do everything, because he established things like organizations like the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund while he was still president, because he could see that while in government there are things that you can do that would have to be done by NGOs, would have to be done by civil society, and civil society needs to take its place where they need to hold systems accountable. They need to be saying these are the issues that still need to be dealt with, including racism. Maybe we should have had a ministry on racial relations. We should have done things that are proper, not just putting a plaster over the wound, which is what in most instances we are praised for the TRC process, which many say it was flawed because it expected too much from the one group and little from the other. So maybe there's more that needs to be done in this reconciliation project.
Mpumi, that Madiba's insistence on reconciliation, is that why we're here today as a country?
Well, in that aspect, in that regard, I wouldn't like to isolate him as somebody who did something wrong by emphasizing reconciliation over other things. I mean, it was necessary at that time, and I think it was not his project. It was the project of the ANC, and he represented that project. He was a symbol and a spokesperson and a figure who represented that reconciliation, which was necessary at that time. I mean, he didn't write the TRC Act on his own. It was written by a full constitutional
But
assembly.
was it a mistake? Was it something that we should not have focused on as much as we did as a country?
I don't think
It
that's
is, no,
fair.
hang on. It is easy to say so
Yeah.
now that we're sitting here enjoying political freedom,
Yeah.
enjoying the freedom of speech, enjoying all of the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution, which the Bill of Rights, which places a lot of responsibility on the government to ensure that people live dignified lives, and all of that. It's easy to sit back now and pontificate and say, yeah, well, we could have done better, he sold us out. It can't be true. I mean, it was necessary at that time to go that step. The thing is, what is it that we have done to take the project further beyond the political
Which is what Silo was
reconciliation?
saying.
I think for me it would be completely unfair and very wrong to say the reconciliation that took place at the time or the message or the call for it was not appropriate, because that reconciliation or post-democracy, opportunities have been open for most of us. Doors have been opened in corporate boardrooms where things are changed. Now what you need transformation soldiers. You need more South Africans who, when they are sitting in those positions, they remember where they are coming from and open doors for others. Now people are in charge of parastatals, they are in charge of even listed companies, opportunities that would not have been there before. But now, one of the legacies that we are forgetting is that Madiba was standing up for what he believed in. And now the people who are sitting there, do they really believe that economic transformation is necessary? And if it is necessary, who are they accounting to? So I think for me, in a relay, people pass on the batons. Utatu Madiba ran a relay and passed on a baton. And that reconciliation led to people given positions of influence. And the question is, what are they doing now with the baton that's sitting in their hands?
Okay.
And if they are not using it effectively, they can't go back. No one must go back and say, now we were sold out, because it's not fair. We need to do our job and make sure that we stand up for what we believe in and stand up to any pressures, because we need economic freedom and it's not going to come for free.
Silo,
can I
just
chip in?
a quick one before you do, Silo. Are we overrating the former president here to the exclusion and to the detriment of other struggle icons? Because when we tell his story, it's almost as though he single-handedly came through and saved this country, and yet we are leaving out people that made a contribution to South Africa.
You know, in 2009, Madiba identified, and he said it many times, that the struggle was a collective effort. And in fact, in 2009, with the first Mandela Day, he said, just as the fight against apartheid was a collective effort, Mandela Day is no different. So you are expected to play your part. So in a way, we, as the Center of Memory, tend to then say, we are not just focusing on Nelson Mandela alone. Hence, we say it's the life and times of Nelson Mandela. You'll see with our exhibitions. We feature, the last one that we hosted was on Robert Sobukwe, for example. And we try to then say, there are many other voices that are there.
But the truth
Some
is, the
have
name
been
that
disavowed.
sells is the Mandela name.
That's true.
And that's the name that you guys are pushing forward as a
But
foundation.
then that's the thing that we fight against a lot. Hence, even we say that it's the life and times of Nelson Mandela. If you look at our exhibitions, Madiba, I think in it could have been 2007, he said we should stop this thing of having exhibitions about himself alone. And since then, we've had about 10.
But Silo,
where
you look at all
pushing
the
other
money
voices.
makers. You've got the 46664, that's his prison number. You've got the 67, that's how many years he's been in prison, or he's dedicated to the struggle. So it's all really around what he has done. You can
But I mean, it's not by accident that it happened that way. You will remember that even when he was in prison, and the ANC heightened the campaign around the need for political change in South Africa. There was a period when the whole call was crafted around the Release Mandela campaign.
Yes.
The Release Mandela campaign was not necessarily a campaign on its own for Mandela. It represented the broader struggle
Yes.
for change in South Africa.
And just to
so
add
you
on to
can't
that-
you can't isolate Mandela from the
Yeah.
rest of society and
And
from the
ju-
rest of his own organization.
Okay, we've got to go.
One,
but
half
one
a
quick
minute.
one.
One quick one. From a business perspective, a brand is a brand. And if Mandela or Tatu Mandela happen to represent the brand of the ANC, I think as people now, we should not start to fight about that. I think it deserves it. And as Mpumi is saying, and Silo as well, when we talk about Mandela, we're not saying we're excluding everybody else,
Okay.
but it is the brand of the ANC that led us to where we are today.
All right. As usual, just as it gets to be really interesting, we've got to go. Thank you so much to my guests for coming through to talk about this wonderful, wonderful man and also to honor his legacy. This is how you can take it forward. The Nelson Mandela Foundation says take 67 minutes of your time and dedicate that time to doing something powerful and something strong, no matter how small, for somebody else. Let's keep it going every single day. Make every day a Mandela Day. Good night.